So I enjoy going back in time, which is a weird thing to say because I can't actually go back in time, but I can in my brain. The other day, a friend of mine said, Simon, who do you think had the best gimmick changes throughout the history of WWE, which basically saved their careers? Because I'm a loser and a content creator, I was like, damn it, there's a video in it. So I'm going to start with one that I think is very common and very, very accurate, and that would be the one and only Roman Reigns. Because seriously, if you go back and watch everything Roman Reigns was doing from, 2014, whenever the Shield broke up, if you compare it to the Tribal Chief, it's absolute gubbins. Now, we knew it was gubbins back then. It was stupid, it didn't feel like Roman, and it sort of felt like we tried to take what John Cena was doing and paste it over to Roman Reigns, because that was Vince McMahon's favorite thing in the world. I'm still flabbergasted that Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't made to be Hulk Hogan, but that's essentially because we tried that with Lex Luger, and we tried it with Kevin Nash, and eventually, obviously, Steve Austin sort of came out of nowhere like a rocket. But if we had just listened to Roman Reigns, because he was basically doing the Tribal Chief character down in NXT, or FCW, I think it was actually before it actually made the switch, we could have saved ourselves so much hassle, because it's not even that the John Cena-esque gimmick that he was playing was dumb, it's that the Tribal Chief gimmick suits him and fits him like a glove. And the biggest mistake we made with all of this is that when he beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania 33, I believe that's correct, and he came out on that Raw and everyone was like, boo, boo, and they weren't going boo-earns. That's when he should have said, it's my yard now. He goes away, give it a couple of weeks, comes back with Paul Heyman. We did all of that stuff. I mean, it probably wouldn't have made sense then with Paul Heyman because Heyman had other stuff going on, but I do not care. We should have started the Bloodline, the Usos. They would have been good to go. They would have been good to cook, and it would have been the best thing ever. So ever since, I guess, the pandemic, we have to thank in a weird way, we did decide to do this with him night and day. Like I say, absolutely brilliant. And if you're into the nerd stuff, like the internet nerd culture, Roman Reigns just went into the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, and I think that's 100% accurate. I think he's a needle mover. I think he's a merchandise seller. I think he puts butts in seats. And I can't imagine WWE over the last half decade without him. I'll never forget the Royal Rumble when he got The Rock booed. It wasn't his fault. You know what I'm talking about. And obviously, suffer and succotash. It's not fair. We should let him forget, but we're geeks and we're not going to. And moving on is someone that has feuded with Roman Reigns a lot, especially when he wasn't this stupid big dog character, I guess we'd call him, and it's Drew McIntyre. Now, Drew McIntyre is the first person to come out and talk about this because Drew McIntyre gets it, but he comes into WWE and he's the future, whatever the hell Vince McMahon called him, which put a target on his back instantly. Like, even if who's the greatest wrestler ever? Bret the Hitman Hart. Even if Bret the Hitman Hart, when he first came in, someone had gone, man, you're the future of the entire business, it just doesn't work, man. You put too much pressure on anybody, especially fans in the modern day, they're going to be like, well, now you got to work twice as hard, bro. You got to prove it to us, because especially the relationship that WWE fans used to have with management. So he then gets put in 3MB, which I don't want to say it was the death nail, but I would imagine even Drew McIntyre and Heath Slater and Jinder Mahal were a bit like, well, this only has a certain amount of shelf life. Unless we can get something else going, we'll be screwed, which is exactly what happened to Drew, because he goes away, does his Drew Galloway stint on the indie scene, makes such a noise that Triple H says, right, come back to NXT. Do not forget, he was barely in NXT when he did return. I mean, 6 months? I think it was less than that. But it was super quick compared to most. And he comes back onto the main roster. And even as the Scottish Warrior, listen, he was in a way better position, and I don't think he ever would have lost his job again. But the real shift we need to talk about is when 2024 at the Royal Rumble, he did accidentally hurt CM Punk's tricep, and to keep the feud going, because they knew that CM Punk wasn't going to be on TV for a while, I can only imagine a combination of that and the fact that we were in the brand new era of WWE. The Triple H said to Drew, just make it happen, man. Whatever you need to do to turn this feud into something that we can continue, even though you can't fight, please do it. So Drew McIntyre essentially dialed himself up to 11, started becoming the ultimate hater. He is the hate of the year 2024, became a wonderful troll on social media, to the point when he does come back, and by the time you're seeing this video, he may have already returned after the Bad Blood Hell in a Cell. That's the guy that he needs to keep. He shouldn't just do that with CM Punk. Let's say he starts feuding with Damian Priest. He should tap into Damian Priest's past, especially because there's all the Punishment Martinez stuff in Ring of Honor, and he should rinse that dry too, because the best thing about Drew is he can be a little bit of a silly Billy on the outside of the ring, but in the ring he's such a monster and he's such a tank and he's so good he can get away with it. He's got that Kurt Angle thing. I'm not saying that he's goofy on the outside of the ring, but he has that parity to him. So career savings, the career save was when he went out to the indie scene, right? He became much more of a serious wrestler, but I think what is going to take him to the tippity top, which he basically already is, like he's a main player in WWE and just decided to bump up a new contract, is becoming troll Drew McIntyre. It just goes to show sometimes you do need to tap into modern things, but it's so much better than what he was doing in 3MB. And listen, I'm a big fan of Goofy Wrestling for Life. 3MB certainly had some entertainment to it, but look what happened to all three of those guys. It's only Drew McIntyre that is still in the company. I'm not saying it's directly responsible for that, but again, you can only do it for so long. And there's nothing else to do because no one is actually going to push a group like that in the proper way, even though I personally would be fine with it. That's not what WWE was doing at the time. But anyway, Drew has totally reinvented himself. And he's probably got a career for life. And this one is a little bit more interesting, but we go to Santino Marella because kind of ties in. WWE are going to be airing a few Raws from Italy, I believe, in 2025. But when he debuted back in 2011, I wrote it down now, I've forgotten, or 12, whatever the hell it was. It may have even been before that. But the point is, WWE was doing a Raw in Italy, and we had an open challenge for the Intercontinental Championship. And look, Anthony Carello, or how we pronounce his last name, is a Canadian man. So we just decided, oh, Santino, you're going to be this Italian. But we also kind of sold him. This is what I want to talk about. Even though he did become the Intercontinental Champion, that's neither here nor there. We did sell him as, I don't want to say a shoot fighter, but he was meant to be a bit legitimate. He was meant to be a bit like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. This guy's going to come after me with real fighting techniques, which is always a daft thing to paste somebody as, unless you are like a Brock Lesnar or a Kurt Angle, because you're saying, oh, he fights for real. So you're also saying that wrestling's a pile of fake nonsense, which you should never do because it's absolutely not that. But I watched a bunch of stuff to try and see where this transition came. But eventually, and this I guess ties into the 3MB stuff that goes to show there is an exception to that rule, him becoming Santino Marella, funny guy, daft idiot, but actually secretly good wrestler that nobody talks about as well. He could really go in the ring. It's one of the best turns that anybody has ever done because not only was he in the WWE for like a decade plus, it was a really, really long time, and people forget that having that kind of run is absolutely crazy, but there are so many moments that are genuinely funny. And listen, him as the shooter, the proper wrestler, and even with a few runs as the IC Championship, would have been fine and would have been good and more power to him, but we wouldn't be talking about John Cena. We wouldn't be talking about the time he had that weird sit-down tea party with Sheamus and Vladimir Kozlov. We wouldn't talk about all that stuff he did with Stone Cold Steve Austin, which I still look back on and laugh. So I do not know how much longer he could have gone as just, I don't want to say faceless fighter dude, because that seems massively unfair, but during that period, everybody was faceless fighter dude. Everybody came out in black trunks. I get it, because they're inspired by Stone Cold Steve Austin. And he was able to find sort of the R-Truth role, I suppose, to the point now he's making a pretty good go of it in TNA, and the accent almost became like his finishing move, right? That's the thing that got him over to the degree that it did, because he knew how to work with it. And it's not all good. I know some people still like it. When you go back and watch the Santino Marella stuff now, it's awkward, to say the least. But I don't think it came from a bad place. It's just maybe times have moved on. But becoming a comedy character there is the greatest thing ever. So if you're an upcoming wrestler and you've got some comedic chops, remember, it's not the worst thing in the world. It may get you a job. And we just mentioned him as well, and we'll be brief with this one because everyone knows the story. But again, I mentioned it when I was talking to my friend, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, forget Stunning Steve in WCW. I actually think there was potential there. And then Paul Heyman's Deadly Alliance. Was it the Deadly Alliance? Whatever it was called. He was really good. And the only reason he didn't prosper more in WCW is because WCW didn't push him. Steve Austin should have been feud with Hulk Hogan as far as I'm concerned, but he didn't. But of course, after he'd done his super entertaining stint at ECW, WWF at the time still decided to hire him as the ringmaster because he was a good hand, right? He was a very, very good technical wrestler, and I suppose they thought he can be in the mid-card, he can be the $1 million champion, and he can work with all of our sort of faces that are on the way to the main event, but Steve Austin will never be the guy in the main event, which was total poppycock. I mean, you knew that Vince McMahon and co had no idea because they put Ted DiBiase with him as a mouthpiece. If there's one wrestler in history that does not need a mouthpiece, it's Steve Austin. But as soon as he got inspired by the serial killer, as soon as he became Stone Cold after his wife said, don't let your tea get stone cold, because she was British, he transformed into, well, I mean, you can argue one of the most inspirational wrestling gimmicks ever, because again, even now, people are still inspired by this. You can see people on independent shows coming out black trunks and black boots and black knee pads. And listen, everybody wants to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, but I actually think that's a detriment sometimes. You need to look through a show and go, what is missing here? And you should be that person, as long as you have the personality to back it up. But if we are talking about, career-saving gimmicks, Steve Austin has to be in there, because I don't think the Ringmaster would have lasted more than 2 to 3 years, because it was completely bland, and you couldn't paste anything on top of it. But it just goes to show, you never do know. So there may be somebody out there right now that's got the worst gimmick ever, and in 5 years, they'll be leading the industry. Which also ties into my next one by accident. Stardust to Cody Rhodes. Now, actually, Cody Rhodes played Stardust very well. It was very entertaining. It was very, very funny because he went in 100%, which is also a pretty good lesson when it comes to stuff like acting or wrestling or any time you do have to step into somebody else's boots. But leaving the WWE in 2016 and going to Ring of Honor and New Japan and everything else that he did on the indies, and then AEW and coming back to WWE as Cody Rhodes, the son of Dusty Rhodes, the American Nightmare. I mean, it's genius. It's a work of art. I'm very inspired by Cody Rhodes as well because he's always been a dude that has bet on himself. And back in 2014-15, when he was playing Stardust, let's not forget just because his brother was Goldust. So it's like the lamest creative ever. That's all we could come up with. But apart from Randy Orton, who said it in many interviews, nobody actually thought he would live up to this idea of being a WrestleMania main eventer, of being a world champion and stepping into the John Cena spot, which is what he wanted. But it absolutely happened. And if he had carried on as Stardust, maybe given his family name, he would have lasted in WWE for a while. But nowhere near as much longevity he's going to have now because, again, he's created this persona that is probably going to be the face of WWE for as long as he wants it. Like, even if all of a sudden there is this crowd turn that people are always expecting, Cody Rhodes knows what he's doing as a heel, and that will prolong him even further. So I do actually like the Stardust stuff. I think it's quite amusing. And once again, it's a nice reminder that no matter where you are on the card, whatever you're given, just do the best job with it as you can. But it ain't as good as Cody Rhodes. Again, right now, no matter what your gimmick was, if I told you I can give you this and it means you can headline WrestleMania 40 and take on Roman Reigns, I have a feeling that you're going to do it. Another one that maybe we don't talk about enough, mostly because it happened during the pandemic, it wasn't around for that long, we pulled the trigger and we did the right thing, is of course Dominic Mysterio. Go back to that SummerSlam during the pandemic when he takes on Seth Rollins. It's a really good match considering it's Dominic's first ever sort of match within WWE, and we're doing it on SummerSlam. And of course a lot of that is Seth Rollins, but the character itself, especially if you go and read news reports or message boards or Reddit, are all like, well, he's fine, but there's nothing really there, and he's the son of Rey Mysterio, and that's about it. And you never want to do that. You don't want to be in somebody else's shadow. Goes back to Cody Rhodes, absolutely stepped out of his father's and his brother's shadow. But all of a sudden, the Judgment Day are born, Rhea Ripley chokes him with her legs. I'm going to leave that there. Comments, you can do whatever you want with it. And he almost becomes the antithesis to his dad and becomes the best bad guy. Like Rey Mysterio is just one of the greatest baby faces ever. You just want to root with him. You just want to be behind him. He knows how to sort of garner sympathy. Whereas Dominic, just by his face, you look at him like, I'd like to punch you in that stupid grill. And it's why the Mysterios are just an incredible wrestling family. I don't really know how they've done this, but somehow they've accidentally taken over the whole industry. But I don't know whether he was told to do it, whether he wanted to do it. I'm sure he's talked about this in interviews, and I haven't seen it. But the mullet, the moustache, I mean, I suppose his relationship with women and how dirty he is with them, how much he cheats in the ring. He just totally understands this character. And one day, not only do I think he is going to be a massive babyface, because when you actually do hit sort of the depths of being an awesome heel, you can make that switch. He could probably be a future world champion. I think he's that entertaining. I think he's improved that much. And he's just got WWE superstar written all over him. So it shouldn't happen for a while. We're talking 5-6 years. I think he's still in his mid-20s. So let him get into his 30s and enjoy his heel run as much as possible. But again, saving careers, maybe I've exaggerated that a little bit. But I only think the Mysterio name would have been able to take him so long. But instead, yeah, he's just recreated himself in his own image. And I think he's brilliant. And I think he's wonderful. And as much as I do want to hate him, obviously we all know deep down we secretly love him. And I also want to talk about Bray White. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because it's so easy to forget those that have passed away. I understand, because there's a grief and there's a tragic nature to it all. But he did it 3 times, essentially, because he was Husky Harris. You can go back and watch Husky Harris now, mostly in NXT. It's just nothing. I don't know whether he came up with that name or it's one of his NXT names that was given to him, but it's pretty stupid, and he was just kind of there, and you would never know that this creative mind was sitting under that big old beard, when all of a sudden, I don't know whether he was allowed to do it or he got pushed for it, becomes Bray Wyatt, starts doing all those creepy vignettes. They put him with Luke Harper and Eric Rowan, and it's just one of the greatest 180 changes ever, to the point, I'm pretty sure, if you showed someone a picture of Husky Harris and then Bray Wyatt, you could argue, I'm not the same person, but they're related, and somebody would believe you. WWE then destroys the East of the World's character. My big thing is he always should have beaten John Cena at WrestleMania 30, but listen, there's a debate to be had there, of course, so you can do that in the comments below, and please subscribe when you are there as well. I would massively appreciate it. But to then come back with The Fiend, and I was at that Raw in 2019 when the first Firefly Funhouse teaser vignette aired, And I remember saying to the guys, what the flub was that? I was really worried because Vince McMahon obviously liked to lean into the dumb stuff. But then after about a month of him doing it, you're just like, how the hell do you come up with this stuff? You really should probably be in movies or doing TV shows. And then we got to the Hell in the Cell a few months later and we totally screwed it up again. But I'm 100% sure that Bray Wyatt would have figured it out. He just would have done. Like, maybe he would have gone back to the Eat of the Worlds, or obviously we had the Uncle Howdy stuff that would have developed. And people love that. And the Fiend merchandise always sold like crazy. So he did have that relationship with the fans. But this is, I probably should have put it at number one, although I'm not ranking these in the way that it kind of sounds like that I am. But it's just a amazing thing to sit down and come up with and then make work. If you walked in here right now and said, Simon, here's this freaky mask, go out there and pretend you're like some supernatural guy, but in a natural world, it's going to be really hard. But Bray White just understood it and he knew what he was going to do. And because there was so much depth to his characters, I mean, I'm sure Husky Harris probably had this. And I think I've read about this before. If he had been allowed to sort of paste his thoughts over WWE TV, maybe we would have understood it more, but it still wouldn't have been in the same league as a Bray White, and it still wouldn't be in the same league as The Fiend. And I genuinely think that it will be a long old time before somebody gets in a WWE or an AEW or pro wrestling on a major stage and is able to do what he did. I think you have to be one of a kind. I think you have to be super duper unique. And what happened to him is just the most tragic thing ever, as it is with Luke Harper. But yes, I think sometimes it's nice to remember what they did do. One of a kind. As in many ways is Becky Lynch. If you read her autobiography, you know what I am talking about. But she writes about this, and it's hilarious. I always go back and watch it because it makes me laugh because it's the most WWE thing ever. The first time she appeared on NXT, all they could come up with is she's Irish, let's make her Irish. So she's wearing green, she does kind of look like a leprechaun, and of course she does the Irish jig, which Becky herself has described as one of the most embarrassing moments of her life, which I totally understand. I suppose it would be for me, Simon, go out there and just be the baldest guy ever. It's like, that's nothing. It's like the most shallow, empty character you could have given me. But actually, I do have respect for Becky Lynch, because if you watch this, she does throw herself into it, which is all you can do, but then backstage she was having a meltdown once again, as she wrote in her book. And you could probably take this all the way up to the man heel turn at the Survivor Series, because even when we did turn her bad guy and then it went all wrong and then we had to turn her good guy again, Becky Lynch was kind of, I mean, she had that random team with Naomi and they did some tag team stuff, and then sure, she was feuding with Charlotte Flair and she was the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion when we released that title. But I don't want to say she felt like an empty vessel, but knowing the personality and the character that was sort of sitting below her tum-tum, it is mad that we never let her showcase that. And then a right punch by Nia Jax all of a sudden blows this up, and we have, do not forget, for a good, let's say at least 12-month period, she wasn't just the biggest woman star in WWE, she was the biggest star. When she was on TV, the ratings were higher than anybody else on the show. She sold the merchandise. That's why she main evented WrestleMania 35. Don't get me wrong, it was long overdue for women to main event WrestleMania. But it also, we had the statistics. So if you went to Vince McMahon, you went, dude, if WrestleMania is about who smashed it this year, it's got to be Becky Lynch. And then we put Charlotte Flair in there, different argument for a different day. But it is, again, no one, when they first sees Becky Lynch on NXT TV, thinks that is the first person to main event WrestleMania. That's the person that's going to shift the industry. That's the person that's going to take us all up to the next level. And it is. And it's why now I think she is going to be back in WWE soon. But she's having hiatus as I talk to you. People roll their eyes and say disparaging things about Becky Lynch. I'm like, man, you've forgotten. She's a trailblazer, dude, and you need to give her more respect. And of course, we talk about respect. We're also going to talk about John Cena, because now it's so hard to forget, because this must be about 25 years ago. I know he was doing the prototype thing when he pretended to be a robot and he'd do promo backwards. That was cool. But that is not what he was when he came out on SmackDown and slapped Kurt Angle and went, ruthless aggression. And then The Undertaker was like, oh man, John Cena, you're great. He was literally just John Cena, and he looked amazing. But I don't even think it was his fault. He just wasn't allowed to do anything. So he was just faceless creator wrestler walking around with his very, very colourful shorts. That was it. And his matches were, I mean, they weren't great, right? But again, I think he was so green, it's unfair to paint him with that brush, because what do you want him to do? If you wanted to get him experience, you've got to put him in experienced positions. But I do believe the story about him almost getting fired is probably accurate, because again, this was the era when everybody was big and jacked. And maybe Cena had a more pleasing aesthetic body than other people. But we're not talking sort of like totally crazy, like, oh man, we've got to keep this guy. And without all of a sudden becoming the doctor of thugonomics after apparently he rapped on a bus, I don't want to talk about that, who even knows where we are now? Without that, WWE could be screwed, because basically from 2002, for like 15 years, John Cena was the guy during a real lull period in wrestling because WCW died and WWE didn't really know what to do. So not only did that save his career, probably saved WWE in many ways as well, which is why I think they called him the GOAT and why they put him on the pedestal that they do. I mean, he deserves it and he's earned it. But I also think when, again, go back to like 2002, 2003, 2004, when we're coming out of the Attitude Era, business is not only bad, but comparatively it's terrifying. And everyone's like, I don't know what to do. And obviously Austin had gone, The Rock had gone, and everybody else that sort of been part of that was sort of on their last legs. But it was John Cena that sort of had this switch and all of a sudden started rapping. And the rapping gimmick doesn't last that long. We turn him into Hulk Hogan babyface as quickly as we do. And listen, kids loved it and families loved it, whereas the older male demographic didn't. But that created this atmosphere, which it wasn't even a problem that it would have been 10 years prior. It just actually was quite a cool thing to be a part of. Let's go Cena. Cena sucks. And I always felt sorry for his opponent. He's wrestling the wall, right? Not the WCW guy. I'm just looking at the wall. Pull the wall. No one making any noise for them. They're making all the noise for Cena. So who's going to get pushed next week? Well, it's going to be John Cena. And we end with the leader of the company right now. Of course, it is Triple H, and we'll keep this one nice and short. Because if you don't know, Triple H ain't just some cool nickname. It's Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Because he was a blue blood from Greenwich when he first came in. He was all posh, he did the bow. People don't think about this and understand why. We just take it as read. Why do you think his finishing move's called the pedigree? Because he was meant to be a posh old man that lived in a nice house. Then he joined Generation X, and I presume it was Shawn Michaels that coined the Triple H term. Maybe it was Rick Rude. It was one of the two. I may be getting that wrong. But he becomes the man with three H's. People start calling him Hunter, but the Hearst and Helmsley, apart from the sort of Helmsley-McMahon era, we don't really touch on that. And not only did he go on to become the best heel in 2000 and 2001, I will die on that hill, but of course, married Stephanie McMahon and now is in charge of creative. So if that is not changing your gimmick to save your career, well, I don't know what is. Now, there will be more of these, so please do drop me a comment below and let me know how wrong I am about those ones I've just thrown out there too. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. You can also click the video on the screen for yet more content from me. I would appreciate that. And if you are into your fitness, please do go to grillermind.com/Simon and use code Simon to get 10% off. They're doing big deals all of the time too, so try and support that as well. And again, I rep these fitness supplements. I actually believe in them, otherwise I wouldn't talk about it. Otherwise, you go to patreon.com/Simon316. All the money that goes in there supports this channel as we do try to grow it, so I appreciate that too. If you want to train at home too, I'm also teamed up with Anthony Agogo and his Agogo Fitness app. You can go to Simon20 to get money off there as well. Come give me a follow on all social media, including Blue Sky at SimonMiller316, Simon J. Miller on TikTok, Simon Miller on Cameo, get a personalized message, and ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller. Otherwise, I appreciate you, my friends, and I'll catch you on the next one.